Guys, lock in. We gotta watch this. Lock in.
The universe of Warhammer 40K is defined by endless conflict, where each and every faction.
Tell me if the volume is too loud or too low. I think I might actually turn this up a little bit.
Now, unfortunately for them, this franchise is one where no individual faction can ever truly win everything. If they did, the whole thing would be over, and James' workshop would be out of a job.
Oh,
and
yeah,
he's
true.
not going to let that happen anytime soon. But what if the impossible actually did happen? What if one of
so we've gone over like who are the good and bad guys. Spoiler, everyone is sort of bad. Who is like who would be like the least catastrophic to win? Who would be like the least catastrophic? Who would have less world destruction, you know? Like I'd say like I think if someone were to win, it'd probably be like the Space Marines for sure, right? Because they're like the main characters. I feel like you do not want any other faction other than humans to win. Let's get that clear. Is the Tau, the Craft World Eldar, are they like, would it be good if they won?
One of the major factions actually managed to win. And I'm not talking about just winning some major battle here or there. I mean, they won the Warhammer 40K. All of their enemies were wiped out, and they finally managed to plant themselves as the galaxy's supreme overlords. Well, in this video, we're going to be breaking down what the galaxy would look like if each faction managed to emerge victorious. And just so you're aware...
Okay, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I know the answer to this. Who is like lore-wise... sort of like the stronger one? If I had to guess, it'd probably be like the Chaos Gods, right? I feel like the Chaos Gods will like objectively be some of the strongest ones. I'm not sure.
This video is going to be getting into some wildly speculative territory, so make sure you strap on your tinfoil hats before you dive in.
The Craft World Eldar would not purge most human worlds just because they can. I don't know, dude. Maybe.
How that would look radically different depending upon who's in charge, either the Silent King or Emotech the Storm.
Learn from their mistakes and their ancestors.
Warning, only one of their paths ends in a happy ending. We're going to be talking about what life would be like for mankind as part of the Tau Empire, and what would happen if chaos managed to merge the warp and the physical universe.
The chaos, yeah. The chaos are pretty, the chaos is pretty strong.
Into something both unrecognizable and also kind of
I mean, like, if the Craft World Eldar did win, yeah, maybe they would just, like, birth a new Chaos God. That's a good point. Because, like, they did it once before. Who's stopping them from doing it again?
We're going to be talking about all that and a whole lot more in this video.
Who's stopping them from doing it again?
First into the Grimdark. If you couldn't tell, I'm a huge fan of classic fantasy, and it's probably one of the main reasons why I find 40K so endearing. I love seeing all of these fantasy species reimagined in the Grimdark future, and whether that be dwarves, demons, elves, beastmen, or even the undead. Now, recently, I've been playing this awesome game that's got
I'm sorry, we gotta skip this. I'm sorry. We're skipping that. I'm sorry. Viewership goes down by like 20%.
Even though the Tyranids are often depicted in the stories as being horrifyingly alien and completely
Tyranids,
when it comes to what they would do if they won, we know exactly what would happen without a shadow of a doubt.
Wouldn't they just like consume everything? Yeah, they just eat everything.
Every animal, every man, woman, and child. All would be boiled down into biomass and used to make even more Tyranids. And we even know what would happen after this because of how the Tyranids showed up in our galaxy in the first place, something that was covered in the epilogue of the novel Pharaohs. Once the galaxy is left as a cold graveyard of dead worlds, and there's nothing left for them to consume, the Tyranid winter will begin.
Dude, look at that. That looks so cool.
Across all of its hive fleets to retreat back into the outer dark and enter a period of hibernation.
The outer dark? What is the outer dark?
Once they exit from the galactic rim, they'll shut down everything but the most vital of life-preserving functions in order to make their gathered biomass last for as long as possible. Then, while they sleep, their long-range augury systems will begin to scan distant galaxies for the telltale markers of prey. It'll likely be tens or maybe...
so they're just like alien galactos. They eat everything, no more food, me hungry, go away, find more food.
Even hundreds of thousands.
So that's basically what they do, okay.
New target is
the outer dark is the dark nothingness between galaxies. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Will pick up
that actually makes sense, yeah.
indicative of intelligent life in a distant
the
galaxy.
hungry,
Once this is
they
discovered,
hungry.
They will slowly begin to exit out of their dormant state and
They're just
head in
hungry
that
for real.
direction.
Let them eat.
Once they
Let bro
arrive,
eat.
they will unleash the same alien terror that they brought to the Milky Way, and the whole process will repeat again. Now, as horrible
So
as
they
the
just
Tyranid
consume
would
galaxies,
be
cool.
for the Milky Way, there is at least some good news. In the novel Bella
Least
series
evil
called
faction
Great
right
War,
there.
it was revealed to us that
I mean,
although
yeah,
the
they're just doing it for survival, really.
Tyranids
If you think about it.
practically nothing behind, and even scrub a planet of water, minerals, and natural resources, they are for the most part surface feeders and don't dig too deeply into the planet's crust before moving on. Meaning that on many of these planets, microbial life will still exist. So give or take a couple of billion years, and the galaxy will be good as new, with all kinds of new species and intelligent life forms to inhabit it. That is, of course, until somebody blows something else up like the Pharaohs again, and they start drifting back in our direction.
Uh-oh. The Necron. Okay, yeah, this would probably be interesting. I want to see what happens if the Necrons
Now,
would
if
win.
it's the Necrons that end up coming out on top and achieve total victory, then one of two things is going to occur, and it's based on who ends up being in charge of them.
Okay, so so the Necrons is pretty interesting, right? Because their main objective as the Necron tier was they just wanted to be like immortal. I don't know why, but like they just had like a miserable existence. And so they just wanted immortality. What would happen if they won?
Either
What would
Zarek, the
happen?
Silent
That's a good
King,
question.
or Imhotep, the Stormlord, the two most
Imhotep.
likely candidates in such a scenario.
Imhotep.
In either case, after the Necrons win, their dynasties are going to begin to spread out and start seizing up more territory for themselves. After the last of their enemy strongholds have been destroyed, and there's nothing left to challenge their rule, a period of infighting amongst the dynasties is likely to occur. Necrons are a proud and arrogant race. Many of their pharaohs believing themselves superior to their peers.
Where's Trazen? Why can't Trazen be the leader?
Endless civil war is surely to follow. And that's where those two previously mentioned individuals come in. Many people believe that the Silent King is the supreme ruler of the Necrons.
The Silent King.
Although that was true during the days of the War in Heaven 60 million years ago.
Trazen, yeah, exactly. They're missing Trazen.
Since he went into self-imposed exile and only
why can't Trazen be the leader?
The Milky Way. In the time that he's been gone, others have risen in his place, and Imhotep, pharaoh of the Sawtek dynasty, views the Silent King as a relic from a bygone era that has no right to continue existing. For his part, the Sawtek dynasty is easily the largest and most powerful.
Yeah, no one likes Trazen, but like he's cool, so he should be the leader.
Not only their enemies, but
that's what
also
I think.
Other Necron dynasties. The pharaohs of these dynasties are given a choice: bend a knee and assimilate into the Sawtek, or refuse and be executed, only for your dynasty to then be absorbed anyways. Now, don't get me wrong, the Silent King is incredibly powerful and wields a considerable amount of influence amongst the Necrons, but
he looks cool.
He isn't exactly popular with everybody. He was the one that made the deal with the Catan to initiate biotransference in the first place. Many Necrons.
Yeah, so he was the one. Okay, so he is like the main guy who was like, yeah, we just want to become immortal, and so to, sort of like in a way cursed his species to immortality, because in the end, like it is sort of a curse, you know.
Thing that has happened to them as entirely his fault.
He's just that much of a that he'd find a way. True.
Imhotep was actually there. He's a ruthless and brutal son of a, but at least he's been here with his people. Unfortunately, we still haven't seen both of these dudes go head to head in any of the
That would be pretty cool, seeing both of them
Games
fight.
Workshop gets around to developing their feud.
Some Gojo X Sukuna type beat.
Insight into this, I'm gonna say it's about a 50-50 shot on who ends up being in charge after the Necrons win. But from humanity's perspective,
was he using like a Catan shard there for a second? Is that what that was?
Matter. It's gonna be a bad time either way. But at least with the Silent
like they can use they entrapped the Catan in like different shards, right? And then they can use it like Pokeballs, from what I remember, right? So they can like sort of harness the Catan's power. That would be pretty cool to see.
King, there will be something of a happy ending, at least for the Necrons. With Imhotep, however, not so much. And this comes down to a difference in philosophy. The Silent King wants to reverse the process of biotransference, likely by using a host species that the Necrons can download their consciousness into. By doing this, they could pick up where they left off 60 million years ago, using their deathless bodies to secure the galaxy for themselves, and then discarding them once they are in control. Because living hosts would be required for this, and a flesh and blood species would have need for plants, animals, and things like that in order to sustain themselves, the galaxy would likely remain much as it is now, and be completely full of life. Sentient species that oppose the Necron's rule would ultimately be subjugated or maybe even exterminated, but primitive species would be likely ignored. However, by contrast,
Oh, that looks so
goes in the complete
cool.
opposite direction. He views their mechanical immortal bodies as an improvement over organics in every conceivable way. He does not view biotransference as a curse. Far from it. He believes it is what led them to their ascendancy. Because of this,
no, that kind of makes, but he kind of has a point. There's kind of some truth to that, yeah.
Would become a kingdom of the dead.
He ain't wrong. Yeah, no, he's not. He's not wrong.
The microbial level would be eradicated without mercy. The Milky Way would be cold and dark. Every world dominated by towering ziggurats and mechanical horrors beyond comprehension.
What are those?
But what comes after all this? Well, I have a particularly dark theory that I would like to put forward, and it concerns the Flare virus. Now, in early
what is the
Warhammer,
the one from the one from Maze Runner?
The thing that turned the Necrons into flayed ones was viewed as a semi-spiritual data virus that came from one of the Catan known as the Flare. It would infect the Necrons and cause them to go insane. They would start hungering for flesh and would even drape the skin of their victims.
Oh wait, that's cool. Wait, I didn't know about that. I didn't know the Flare was a thing. So it was like, it's like a virus, like an actual virus that takes over the robots. Oh, cool.
They once
That's kind of cool.
The only problem was
that turns them into zombies.
Flesh, they didn't actually have mouths to eat it with. They were akin to Hungry Ghost, an entity lost to madness that just fell deeper and deeper into a well of insanity with every passing century of their immortal life. In more recent lore, i.e. the Twice Dead King series, it was suggested that the Flare virus is not a virus at all. It is the true inherent fate of all Necrons, that they will all eventually turn into one of these things. Whether it's something that just inevitably happens to each and every Necron, or it spreads like a plague after the Necron total victory, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. Since at this point all organics would have been destroyed, the Silent King's dream of reversing biotransference is now utterly and completely dead. Since the Necrons still have no way of repopulating, they'll all eventually become a flayed.
Okay, so if this guy wins, it's bad. Okay.
Years for this to occur.
The bad ending.
Make no mistake, if Imhotep becomes the supreme overlord of not only the Necrons, but the entire galaxy, one day he will watch as their dynasties crumble and the Milky Way becomes inhabited by hungry ghosts. Crazed entities desperate to consume the flesh of organic creatures that all died out thousands of years ago, leading to an endless age of madness and insanity. Can you imagine what this would look like to somebody visiting from another galaxy? Like, they touch down on a planet and they're clearly seeing signs of ancient civilizations, but they must have all died out a long time ago. They're like, well, sucks for them, but hey, free real estate for us. This place just needs a new coat of paint and it could be a brand new home for us. And then an entire galaxy of flayed ones, literal mountains of them, start ripping portals across space and time and descending upon them. And they're like,
they can open portals, yeah.
So yeah, total Necron victory.
They can still do stuff. Yeah.
Who ends up as their supreme leader? But at least with the Silent King, is somebody will get a happy ending.
Yeah, no. Okay, so if the other guy wins, that's bad. So if the Silent King wins, he just wants to turn everyone back into like not robots. But then if the other guy wins, he's like, no, everyone stays robot, and then they become zombies. Basically. The Orks. Metallic Tyranids.
Now, it's certainly not going to be
pretty
fun
much,
for anyone else, but if the Orks manage
Eldar 2 can pop out of nowhere with their webway portals. Yeah. Oh yeah, true. I forgot.
Total victory, they're going to have a great time. The galaxy is going to become one big chaotic and violent playground, dominated by warring orc clans. Now, at first, they're just
it'd just be like eternal war.
Remnants of power from every other major faction, either
it'd just be like an eternal war,
or taking them as slaves. However, after they've run out of enemies to fight, the orcs are going to do what they always do when boredom takes hold. They're going to turn on each other and start.
Yeah, they're going to turn on each other.
The galaxy's natural ecosystem after this will completely collapse and will be replaced by orc biomes. As the clans
orc biomes, what are those?
Each and every planet.
Look at that dude, he looks so cool. Like, what is the science behind using? I'm guessing this is like a skull as like the top piece of this gauntlet thing. Like, what is the science behind it? It looks cool. It works. I believe that it works. So it works. And it works. Yes. It looks cool. More damage. Look. Skull. Cool. More damage. Yes.
Like a plague until every surface is teeming with orcoid
Science
life,
is imagination. Yeah, that's what's cool about it.
Squigs, Gretchen, or feral orcs. All technology in the galaxy will be scavenged and orcified. The creating ever more bizarre and unstable contraptions, some going as far as turning entire star systems into massive malfunctioning engines of war. Now,
that would be so cool. Imagine you just turn like an entire planet into just an engine. Like for what? Oh yeah, planet move, go fast, vroom. That would be so cool.
I recognize that, but just hear me out. As demonstrated in the Beast, the more orcs gather together, the smarter they collectively become. With the orc population now completely out of control,
is that real?
I think we may enter a period where the orcs start to revert back to their previous form. That is to say, they'll revert back.
Oh yeah, because they're old. They're an old species, and back in like the good old days of a few billion years ago, they were actually smart. Yeah, because they talked about that in a few videos ago that we watched.
Back to the Orks, the 30-foot tall, super intelligent life forms from back during the days of
the super intelligent.
At this point, they may even reach a point somehow beyond that, as the galaxy becomes completely dominated.
Look at that, dude. That looks sick.
If such a thing takes place, I think it's reasonable to believe that these super Orks would be able to develop technology that allows them to travel to distant galaxies, thus entering a dark new era for the universe, a never-ending war that spreads out to all of reality.
Whoa, that's cool.
That due to the inherent need for conflict within the orc species, it's unlikely that they would all join forces and head to a new
galaxy. Yeah, no, that's doubtful. They just fight each other.
Go off in different directions.
Too much work to go to other galaxies. Orc fight here.
Hundreds of thousands of galaxies would suddenly have orcs entering into them. And by the time they got there, they would have spent a considerable amount of time away from the combined Wa, thus leading to the super intelligence from before slowly reverting back to the orcs we know today. In conclusion, if the orcs win, they'll end up doing the same thing they've always done, but in a new place and a new time. Honestly, it would be hilarious if this is actually something that already happened, and Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar are actually sequels to Warhammer 40K.
Warhammer 40K. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Imagine though, the Tau.
One of the first things that you learn when you start reading about Warhammer is that there are no good guys in this setting. The second thing that you learn is that that's not really true. The Tau are arguably pretty nice and cool dudes. The third thing that you learn is that that's also not true. The Ethereals are up to some shit, and the greater good gives peace in exchange for freedom. All that being said, the Tau rising to power and wiping everybody else out is probably the best case scenario for the Milky Way galaxy, at least if we're talking in terms of total faction victory. They're a faction that, shockingly, actually values peaceful relationships and diplomacy with other Xenos species, an extreme rarity in the grimdark future where everybody hates each other. Their philosophy of the greater good preaches a lot of things, but primarily, it's that every action one takes should do the most good for the most people. Concepts like the self, individualism, personal greed, etc., are all massive taboos under this philosophy. If the Tau were able to take over the galaxy, they would spread this message to every entire species.
Look at that Space Marine. That looks so cool.
They would end up uniting the Milky Way under their banners, and instead of war, would prioritize harmony, efficiency, and technological advancement. Unfortunately, some species are inherently too dangerous to be allowed to exist, so the Orks and the Tyranids would be eradicated without mercy.
Oh yeah, no, they need to go.
Eldar,
they need to go. They're racist.
Into the Tau Empire.
Okay, so the Tau, like everyone else, is super racist.
But all of their powerful technology would be confiscated or dismantled. The same scenario is likely for many of the newly inducted species, but we'll focus on the human perspective just to keep things simple. The Imperium would be completely dismantled. Its bureaucracy and religious institutions would be incompatible with the ideals of the
Their designs just stick out like a sore thumb in like the rest of the 40K universe.
And religious practices would be
like they don't look bad or anything, but they just like stick out a lot.
Continue to exist, as the Tau do believe in respecting the ancestral traditions.
I have not, no.
That being said, elements that their new overlords deem problematic, such as the former Imperial Creed's whole "suffer not the alien to live" thing, would be meticulously censored. Many Imperial citizens would see becoming part of the Tau Empire as a good thing and would happily comply, whereas others would attempt to rebel. Troublesome individuals like this would be sent to re-education camps and be fed a never-ending barrage of greater good propaganda until they could be brought back into compliance.
Propaganda.
Regardless
Oh
of
no.
what is or isn't allowed, over the millennia, human
That's me
culture
for
would
real.
begin
Smash.
to erode and be forgotten.
Literally
it may
me.
take an incredibly long time for this to happen, but eventually humanity would fully assimilate, and the Imperium would become nothing but a distant memory. Now, all of the new species being folded in would be forced into the Tau's rigid social structure. This would entail the suppression of individuality and the stifling of personal freedom. Autonomy and tradition would be sacrificed in the name of homogenization. As I mentioned before, this is an element that would lead to dissatisfaction and potential rebellions, which in turn will cause the Tau Empire to bring down the hammer, making an example out of all those who refuse to accept the greater good. In many ways, humanity would end up trading the leash of one master for another, bound into servitude no longer by the imperial war machine, but the greater good's promise of peace and progress via assimilation. I'm mostly focusing on the negatives here.
Look
but
at that,
all things considered,
bro.
I think the vast majority of Warhammer fans would agree
Pacific
that
Rim
if they
looking,
were to suddenly be isekai'd into the 40K universe, they would pray they ended up on a Tau world rather than in the hive cities of the Imperium. Like I said before, however, it's not all sunshine and rainbows under the Tau's banners. A lot would be sacrificed.
Yeah, that wouldn't
but
be
by
cool.
comparison, It's probably an overall
That wouldn't be
better
fun.
bet. Imperial citizens still may not have a lot of freedom, but at least they'll be safe, and their quality of life will be marginally better.
Someone sent me a
That
gift
is,
on
of course, until the
Steve,
Ethereals
was that you,
recognize that
Chelsea?
humanity is actually the most dangerous species of all, and keeping them alive is continuing to influence the warp and empower chaos.
Mayhaps?
At that
I'll
point,
check it out in
all
a
of
second.
humanity will likely be killed. But hey,
The Tau are as oppressive as everyone else. Yeah, pretty much. But they have fancy utopia dreams, yeah. The ruinous powers.
For mankind,
What?
any faction achieving total victory would be catastrophic. In many respects, that includes the Imperium itself, but we'll get into that a bit later in the video. However, one faction stands apart from the rest as a truly worst-case scenario, and that would be if the forces of chaos emerge triumphant in the grimdark future. Such an event
That would be, yeah,
have
because
profound
that
consequences.
aren't they like theoretically one of the strongest ones? Theoretically, like at least in my headcanon, that's how it worked. I could be completely wrong. Then again, I'm no expert on the 40K lore.
Consequences for the Milky Way.
This is
and
what I
all
think.
of reality. Chaos is traditionally represented by the four chaos gods: Khorne,
Yeah.
the god of bloodshed and murder;
Wait, I remember. It's Zeech, Khorne, Nargol, and Slanesh.
Tzeentch, god of sorcery, lies, and treachery; Nurgle, the god
Nurgle.
of life, death, plagues, and disease; and
And
Slanesh,
Slanesh.
the dark prince of excess. If left with none to stand against them, the galaxy would be overwhelmed by rage,
Are the strongest,
bloodlust,
I'd say.
ambition,
The
decay,
Catan,
despair,
really?
and indulgence. Order would completely
But
collapse.
the Catan have been
The
sealed
kingdoms
off.
of man and the Xenos empires
Nurgle,
would
yeah.
crumble and descend into
I was thinking of
anarchy. The
Yargle
entire
from
galaxy
Magic.
would come to look exactly like the Eye of Terror, as the fabric of reality was torn apart and the warp and real space melded together into an eternal hellish existence.
So hell and the real world just become one. What is this, Persona 5?
With chaos ascending to power, the god
Yeah.
emperor of mankind would be destroyed or corrupted, an event that would
Where are
shatter
the Phantom
Imperium
Thieves?
and leave the million worlds of humanity isolated or consumed by rampaging warp storms. With no god to guide them, the faithful
Warp
of humanity
storms?
would be
That sounds
eradicated. All others
sick.
would turn to the worship of the ruinous powers simply to survive. Species like the Tau, Tyranids, and Necrons, who under normal circumstances have little to no impact on the warp, and thus are rarely if ever influenced by chaos, would be unable to adapt to this new nightmare reality and would be wiped out. With the Eldari, a couple of different things could possibly happen. The webway would be
Yeah,
destroyed.
wouldn't they like continue, like if this happened, wouldn't they just like continue to become stronger, the Chaos Gods, I mean?
Under tides of demons.
They just be
The
like,
laughing
because
gods
like more people
suffer
are like dying and suffering and stuff, so they just keep getting stronger. That would be pretty bad.
the same fate as the Emperor.
I'm
The
working
Dark
the thousands
Eldar,
of shards,
having
the full body
evolved to
Catan.
no
I think can
longer be a
destroy a
psychic
star system with
species like
little
their
effort.
cousins, would
Really?
likely go the way of other less warp touch species.
Wait, if they can destroy entire star systems, how did they get jumped by the? How did they get jumped by the Necrons then? How does that work?
Devoured wholesale by Slanesh. In her
They
glut,
might be
it is
mentioned.
likely she would consume the souls of all of the
Maybe,
other
but they
Eldari
are,
as
like,
well. But
currently
this would
locked
take
up.
some time. In the species' last few centuries of life, however, the remaining Eldari would become fully
Oh, I don't
corrupted
have
by
water.
chaos,
I only have a
and
little bit of
now
water.
existing in a universe flooded with warp energy where reality bends to the individual's will. These few surviving corrupted Eldar would see their abilities increase to ludicrous proportions, turning them into powerful warlords, the equivalent of demon princes, or even greater demons. In time, however,
so
they
that's
too
bad?
would end up becoming consumed by She Who Thirst. This would end up bringing about the prophesized creation of Ynid, the Eldar god of death, though at this point it would be too little too late. Ynid would not be capable of standing against the empowered Chaos gods and would likely be wiped out without much effort. And the Orks,
Dude.
I'm just gonna be honest with you, I'm pretty confident they
Combination of
wouldn't be
them
too
wearing
bothered
with
by
each
all the
other,
changes.
as well as Silent
Sure, they
King
would
choosing the
certainly
perfect
notice that
moment.
something was different, considering the
Oh,
whole
and even
galaxy
then they
was
took
on
heavy losses.
fire,
Oh,
but
okay.
Meh. When life gives you
Let's
lemons and all
see.
that. They would either become the puppets of Khorne, unable to continue worshipping Gork and Mork as Khorne's
Gork and
influence
Mork.
increased 100-fold.
that's
Or,
so,
and
that's a
fair
cool
warning,
name.
I'm gonna go full tinfoil hat mode here.
Ow, my back.
Considering that the Orks would without a doubt thrive during the Chaos end times, Gork and Mork themselves
Gork
may
and
ascend
Mork.
to become the 5th and 6th Chaos gods.
Wait,
due to
really?
The Orks' population ballooning out of control and the entire collection of them beginning to be warped by the mutating energies of the
Wait,
Imperium.
what?
It's grossly oversimplifying things, but chaos by its very nature cannot exist without conflict. Thus, as a faction, it denies conventional definitions of ultimate victory. In turn, what we consider a chaos victory is nothing more than an evolution of the great game. A second edition, an
Oh,
expansion,
so
or even a
it's-
sequel if you want to throw some game terms into the mix. In this new reality, Khorne's
see.
bloodlust, Tzeentch's scheming, Nurgle's decay, Slaaneish's indulgence, and whatever the hell Chaos Gork and Mork decide to get up to would leave no room for resistance or recovery. The now 6 great powers would continue to wage never-ending war amongst themselves, but now on a grander scale than anything seen before.
I
Reality would unravel
see.
into a horrific era of perpetual torment, madness, and suffering, with no hope of redemption.
Orc is brutal but cunning, and Mork is cunning but brutal.
Now, if the Eldar
makes
managed
a
to
lot of
achieve
sense,
total
yes.
victory, it not only would see the restoration of their ancient empire, but
What if
it
a
would
Catan
also bring
ones?
about the unification
That's
of
one hell of
each
a power
different
skill.
branch of Eldar
Oh.
society. The craft
I
worlders,
see. So wait,
excavating-
the Emperor fought off a Catan? Wait, so he's pretty strong. Is that real? Someone in the comments is gonna flame me for that, Hobas. I'm sure of it.
Night colonies, the Harlequin
Welcome back,
troops, the
Janus.
Corsairs, even the denizens
Big
of the Dark City of
orange.
Gamora would
Got a
all
big
maintain
orange.
a prominent role within this restored
Iron
kingdom.
orange.
As the Eldar are a
Iron,
dying
iron,
race
iron.
and don't really have the numbers to achieve total victory the old-fashioned way, their victory would likely come about through the creation of Ynid, via gathering the 5 Crone swords, thus overriding the clause that says the
Yeah,
only way the
the
nascent
death
god could
god.
be birthed is through the death of the entire species. As is their purpose, Ynid would then set about destroying Slaanesh first, thus ending the soul drain that plagues the Eldar race. This is all we really are told about the prophecy surrounding Ynid's birth, but as has been demonstrated many times in the past,
60
when a
FPS.
demon kills another demon, they can either absorb their soul, thus gaining all of their power and wisdom, or bind them into an incredibly powerful weapon. Although this isn't something
okay.
that's specifically stated could happen with a Chaos God, is since we're in tinfoil hat territory, I don't see why the rules would be any different. So you've got a god who's powerful enough to kill another god, and that god was at least strong enough to hold their own against the other 3 Chaos gods and the Emperor at the same time. These 2 entities fusing together would make them ludicrously powerful. I believe at this point, Ynid wouldn't stop here, and would go about murdering the other Chaos gods as well in
That would
order
make
of
sense.
strength according to the lore. First Nurgle, then Tzeentch, and then finally Khorne. And
Oh, Khorne is the
somewhere in
strongest?
between, they would likely kill the God Emperor as well. After this, I believe Ynid would aid the Eldar in resurrecting the rest of the Eldar pantheon that had previously been killed
What
by
is the
Slaanesh,
Eldar
with the God of Death
pantheon?
taking their rightful place atop the hierarchy. During all of this, the Eldar would have risen to heights never before seen in terms of individual power. Their Farseers would be able to conjure warp storms of raw death energy generated by Ynid that would make the ruin storm created by the Wordbearers during the Horus Heresy look like a stiff summer's breeze by comparison. The rest of their enemies
Jesus.
would quickly be wiped out, and the Eldar would go about reshaping the galaxy in their image. Through superior Wraithbone technology, psychic mastery, and unparalleled artistry, they would usher in a utopia of cultural and technological marvels. So, sounds pretty good if you've got pointy ears, but for everybody else,
yeah, if you, yeah.
Any
if
that
for
were
everyone
not killed
else, yeah,
outright
you're
by
dead.
The Eldari would face stark consequences for their actions against the Empire in the past. Members of the lesser races would be subjugated or destroyed. Institutions like the Imperium or the Tau Empire would be dismantled brick by brick. While species like the Tyranids and the Orks would be completely
They never understood as
eradicated.
chaos gods are formed by emotion and thought of mortals. So if they kill all the mortals, what's next? Won't they just starve to death? Good question. I don't think so. I think they're just like sort of. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. The only proof that I could find with quick search and the whole Emperor versus Catan thing was a single paragraph on the website. It's like Goonhammer, website called Goonhammer. Ah, yes. My sources. Trust me, bro.
If any of the major players would be allowed to continue on, it would likely be the Tau, as they have worked closely with the Eldar many times in the past. And although the relationship isn't perfect, it's a lot better than every other faction. Like I mentioned before, their empire would be dismantled and their most powerful technology compensated, but I don't foresee the Eldar condemning them to extinction. The Necrons, however, would go down swinging to the last. There is no conceivable way they would stand by and do nothing while their most ancient of enemies ascended to power once more.
Yeah.
One by one, their tomb worlds would detonate, and their legions would be reduced to ash until the final Pharaon was forced to bear witness to his once great dynasty, reduced to a kingdom of dust. But after this is all said and done, what will end up happening to the galaxy?
This knight looks so cool. I don't know who that is, but that looks cool.
Worlds noted for having pristine natural beauty. They would then not allow any other species to colonize on them and would basically maintain them as planet-sized nature preserves. These worlds were called the Maiden Worlds, and the goal was that they would eventually become inhabited by Eldar. I think we would see the Maiden Worlds go from numbering in their thousands to their billions, many of them finally seeing their first Eldar colonies established on their soil, while the rest ripened, waiting to be harvested.
Just don't go crazy with feelings again.
That seldom gives birth.
Create yet another chaos god.
Their numbers would be
well, in that case, like your other god will just kill it
after reclaiming the galaxy. So all of these Maiden Worlds would spend a considerable amount of time going uninhabited. And in an ironic twist, after an Eldar total victory, the galaxy would return to its natural, beautiful state. There just would be a lot fewer people left to appreciate it.
I see. The Imperium.
Now, when it comes to the Imperium's total victory, it could potentially go in a lot of different ways. Some people believe that the God Emperor will return and lead humanity into the promised Golden Age.
Yeah, but isn't he like pretty much dead?
He will fully ascend to godhood and become a being of the Immaterium, where he will there watch over and protect us from chaos. Some believe that the warp will be entirely destroyed along with the ruinous powers.
Yeah, but then no one can use magic.
Instead, now relying on the recently conquered webway for interstellar travel. I understand the mindset behind each of these ideas, and in small portions I think they're all correct, but I do take a few issues with them. First, even if the Imperium does away with warp travel and starts using the webway exclusively, the Immaterium
it's like a cathedral on the ship, dude. That's so sick.
It and our universe are not two separate places. They are two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. And so long as humanity exists, so too will negative emotions, which have a direct impact on the Sea of Souls. Meaning that even if mankind and the Emperor managed to kill all of the forces of chaos and destroy each and every one of the chaos gods, it's very likely such threats will re-emerge sometime later in the future.
Yeah, because that's the thing, it's chaos. It's energy, it's stuff.
Legion of enemies to fight against, the human population is going to very quickly start to balloon out of control. Somehow even worse than it already is. Now, ultimately, we don't know what the Emperor's true intentions are, so for this analogy,
he's just racist like everyone else.
Assume that in his wisdom, he would choose to remain as a spiritual being rather than return to the physical universe. He can be a lot more help to mankind in the Immaterium anyways. So it would seem then that the warp will mostly be under control and humanity will have no more wars to fight.
Becomes
but
Jesus.
Not so fast. That's only against aliens, mutants, and heretics. In reality, the vast majority of
Warhammer 40K is Jesus.
come from within the Imperium itself, and it's not even really close. Shifting alliances, ballooning populations, a continuous lack of resources, technological stagnation, and interfaction conflict will still be pretty commonplace. The Imperium is not a unified whole. It is a techno-feudal theocracy comprised of thousands, if not millions, of different factions. Be they different sects of the Imperial Creed, different planets, different sectors, different branches of the Administratum, etc., etc.
Administratum.
Even today, the Imperium is riven with competing
What is
factions
that?
that all war against each other for
That looks so
resources
cool.
and influence. Sometimes openly and sometimes
something out of
fought in
Dark
shadows
Souls.
in wars of espionage and sabotage. All of mankind's problems are not going to disappear. They're going to get exponentially worse as its population begins to skyrocket. From my perspective,
That would make
in order
sense.
for true peace to be achieved within the Imperium, in order for our species to enter its new golden age, it will have to ascend into something unrecognizable, something cold, logical, and mechanical. It is for this reason that I personally believe the most likely scenario to occur after an Imperial victory will in time reveal itself to be a victory for the machine, a victory for the Adeptus Mechanicus. So what would this
that
actually
makes
look
sense.
like?
That actually
Well,
kind of
after
makes
the last
sense.
of mankind's foes are slain and the Imperium has declared total and complete victory, they will begin their largest expansion effort yet, spreading out to every corner of the
About the
galaxy,
Katan inside
wherein they
Mars, that
establish
Void
new
Dragon.
colonies on every
Oh.
world capable of supporting
That's
life,
the Void Dragon?
including those previously held by
What
their
is the
foes.
Void Dragon?
The dogmatic creeds that bind the Imperium for making considerable leaps forward in technology will still be in place. So, just like today, the only true form of advancement comes in the form of constructs created by recovered STCs from the Dark Age of technology, the vast
Dark
majority of
Age of
which being
technology.
controlled, maintained, and studied by the Adeptus Mechanicus. With no more existential threats to face, the Martian priesthood will be able to dedicate more resources to their explorator fleets. Thus, the rate of STC recovery will advance exponentially, causing humanity to look more and more like the Dark Age of technology with every passing century. It is around this time that the Imperium would begin to resemble what we could consider a true golden age. Over time, it may even surpass the Dark Age of technology. But that's when the major cracks will begin to show, a prelude to the era of the machine. Although on paper, the priesthood of Mars is part of the Imperium, it's more accurate to think of them as an allied nation, considering the level of autonomy they are afforded and the amount of power they wield. The divide between these two factions
Look at
will
that,
continue
bro.
to grow deeper and more
It's so
fractious
cool.
with every new STC that the Mechanicus obtains.
Weird looking
Sure, the Imperium
cyborg.
will have numbers, but that doesn't really matter when the Mechanicus gains the ability to construct sun snuffers.
I
that
you guys
able
are
to
speaking
consume
gibberish.
Entire stars and mechnivores large enough to literally bite a planet in half. As the machine cult continues to grow in power and influence, the Red Planet will eventually surpass
Mars?
Terra as the new seat of humanity's power. Although Terra is a holy world, it is also a bloated carcass. Its population in the 41st millennium is said to be in the quadrillions, and it's estimated that some 80% of all of the resources generated across the Imperium's million worlds are brought back here to maintain this glorified monument to the weakness of flesh. This is something that will only get worse as the Imperium expands. Now, eventually, the Mechanicus will view Terra as a liability, no longer worth
Emperor
maintaining.
Alexander the
They will see it
Great
as a cancerous growth that needs to be
has
excised
ironically
for the
been
good of
confirmed.
mankind.
The
To
Emperor
say
is
such
also
a
Jesus,
decision would
yes.
spark insane backlash
He is Jesus.
and immediate retaliation is a big understatement.
He's also Gabe Newell,
So
yeah.
I believe this is a plan that may take millennia to come to pass. When the attack comes, the Mechanicus will have agents in place across the cosmos to quell any resulting rebellions.
What is the attack doing?
And decisive, the opening salvo in the machine cult's war on flesh. Considering that they own all of the STCs, all of the Forge worlds, all of the technology, and all of the means of production,
okay, so it just turns into
there will be
cyberpunk.
very few that could actually stand against them. At this point, many would likely support such actions. In the thousands of years they took to make their move, the machine cult would have been spreading propaganda and inducting larger and larger segments of the population into their teachings. Not only would Mars have become the most powerful
Look at
planet
that is
in the
just a
galaxy,
skull.
but it is also likely that at this point, the machine cult has surpassed the Imperial Creed as the dominant religion of mankind. After the Mechanicus has formally risen to power and has taken control of the Imperium in its entirety, its
I just
dogmatic
finished eating a
teachings will
big
continue to
orange.
spread until all have
Good
been
for you,
assimilated
Janus. Good
into
for
the
you.
cult. All
Are
of
you
our
into Star
species
Wars? Not
will
really.
become further mechanically augmented.
I've never
After
seen like the
last
original
STCs
movies.
is recovered, the Mechanicus will unlock the secrets of and make contact with the true machine god. It is at this point that humanity
true
will
machine
begin to reach
god?
its apotheosis, where it will transcend flesh entirely and become fully mechanical. A galaxy-spanning supercomputer where every world and every individual person is another node in its vast interconnected network. The galaxy will grow cold
Dude.
and still, every planet dominated by towering servers and massive databanks. From the outside perspective, it will look as if the Milky Way is dead, but this couldn't be further from the truth. The galaxy is now a machine. If there is anything left of the
Jeez.
human species,
Okay.
they will now exist as data ghosts echoing throughout the galaxy's servers. This is the ultimate fate of mankind. What will happen
Machine,
if they
becoming
achieve
just a
victory?
machine.
Or who knows, maybe the Emperor really will come back and he'll make everything better again and humanity will get its well-deserved happy ending. But what do you guys think of all this? Do you agree with any of my
Jesus,
theories, or do
okay.
you think I've totally missed the mark with this video? If your own personal theories differ from mine, what do you think would happen if each one of the factions was somehow able to achieve total victory?
I don't know. Somehow that
Again,
the
don't take any of
humans
theories
winning
I
and
put
doing
forward
all
in this
that
video too
seems a
seriously.
bit
None of them are canon.
of a
This was
stretch,
more of
but
a thought
what do I
experiment
know?
type video that
I
I
don't know,
thought
that
was
just
fun.
feels
It all stemmed from a
from-
late night
well, I
hangout
mean,
session with
not-
somebody
I
where
guess I could
admittedly,
sort of see
a
it.
frankly irresponsible amount of alcohol was consumed. But I
Cool.
did try to back up some of my more wild tinfoil hat
He
takes
did not
with
mention
the war as
Catan.
it
He
is
needs to do like a
currently
part two.
in
Part
reality, we have no
part
idea what
two.
would happen. Warhammer is
part
a franchise
two.
where no faction can ever win. That's kind of the whole point.
I did
But
not mean
anyway,
to say part
leave all
two,
your
by the way.
thoughts,
I did not
questions,
mean to do
comments,
that. That was on
concerns,
accident.
and ideas for future videos down in the comment section below. And if you haven't
Part
subscribed to the
two.
channel already, it would mean a lot to me if you did. We're on the road to 1 million subscribers.
I
So do your
ironically
part in
didn't
the
mean to
long
say
war,
that.
and go ahead and touch that subscribe button. It's free, and you'll feel
Touch
a whole
it?
lot
How?
better after
How
you
should-
do.
how should I touch it?
Also, don't forget
This
to check
question.
out Raid Shadow Legends using my
Dude,
link in the
yeah,
description.
that was that was pretty cool. I just think the like humans winning, I don't know, like it feels like a bit of a stretch to say that they'd be doing all that. But then again, like this is like billions of years in the future, you know? Like this is like a lot of time. Oh, not billion, like this is millions of years in the future. So what do I know? Then again, like I'm not the professional here, you know? That might just be the case. I think the most like the for sure answer is like the if the Tyranids won, like yeah, they just eat everything. Bros would just like start eating stuff. But that was cool, dude. That was awesome. That was pretty cool. It's cool to learn about these things. I like it.